Imagine Iran. What do you think of? Terrorism? The hostage crisis? Nuclear weapons? Now let's fast forward to 1953. When people thought of Iran, they imagined liberty, freedom, and democracy. What went wrong? What happened in 1953 to turn Iran from an outpost of the free world to a member of the Axis of Evil? The answer to this question traces back to the early 1900s. By the turn of the century, Iran was ruled by a dynasty of Shahs, or kings, called the Qajars. The Qajar dynasty was known for their amazing ability of draining the Federal Reserve's partying throughout European clubs. In order to support their lifestyle, they sold off Iranian assets to British companies. In 1905, the Shah sold the rights to Iranian oil to William D'Arcy Knox, British billionaire entrepreneur. This enraged the people, who promptly revolted and established a constitutional monarchy with a legislature called a Majlis. The Shah eventually died, allowing the new Reza Khan Shah to take over in 1921. He was promptly removed by the culturally sensitive British during World War II, allowing his cowardly son, Mohammad Reza Shah, to assume power. After I summarized half a century of complex Iranian history, we can follow the life of Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh was a unique Iranian, as he was the first Iranian to get into a European law school. At a young age, he was elected to Majlis but fled the nation when Reza Shah took over. But when he came back after World War II, he found a new enemy: the British. D'Arcy's purchase grew into the British-owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. This company owned the infamous Abadan refinery. The refinery was the biggest on the planet when it was built, but its notoriety comes from the treatment of its workers. A first-hand account writes that the wages were 50 cents a day, there was no vacation pay, no sick leave, no disability compensation. The workers lived in a shanty town called the Paper City without running water or electricity. In the winter, the earth flooded, the mud was knee-deep, summer was worse. To the management of AIOC, in their pressed ecru shirts and air-conditioned offices, in the British sections were lawns, rose beds, tennis courts, swimming pools, and clubs. The dreadful environments down to separate water fountains for different races were not just it. The AIOC cheated Iran out of 13 million British pounds each year. When workers went on strike, the British mobilized their navy. Iranians nationwide protested as the British abused Iranians while bribing Majlis to make sure what they wanted passed. The British came up with what was known as a supplementary agreement to compromise with human rights activists, which, based on technicalities, did literally nothing to help. However, the Shah, under British imperialist payroll, realized he needed to get the agreement passed. The Majlis filibustered the passing for over 4 days until their terms were up, accomplishing nothing, just like our own government. In the next election cycle, the British realized they needed a new candidate for Prime Minister. The elections had been disrupted when the Shah tried to bribe and cheat his way through royalist candidates. However, this only caused Tehran to erupt in protest, in response causing the elections to be redone. But in the new election cycle, Mohammad Mossadegh made a comeback. He combined political parties and civic unions into a large movement called the Nationalist Front. The Nationalist Front was a new movement celebrating Iranian freedom from the British oppression. However, it wasn't the only political party. There was also the Communist Tudeh Party. The Tudeh had representation in the Majlis and passed evil commie bills like limiting child labor, adding maternity leaves, and establishing a minimum wage. However, the British didn't care about some nationalists who believed Iranians were human beings or irrelevant communists. They wanted the oil, and the only way they could get the oil was through the king. So control they must, and finally Ali Razmara was appointed prime minister. As usual, when Razmara was appointed, Mossadegh gave a fiery speech about how he was a tool of foreign powers, just as he had said about Reza Shah. Razmara himself, a political man, thought of a way to use the rising nationalism to his advantage, so he tried to compromise with the British. Maybe Iranians could now audit the books or apply for management positions. But yet again, after the umpteenth number of times, the British rejected the compromise. Everyone in the entire nation realized the British were playing puppet master. The tide turned when Mossadegh and Nationalist Front supporters gathered to support the radical idea of nationalizing Iranian oil, so it belonged to the Iranians, not the British. Mossadegh gave the usual riveting speech, and many mullahs came up to sway the fundamentalists. With religious conservatives and liberal secularists teamed up to fight for Iranian rights, Razmara was finished. When the vote for nationalization was counted, 96 out of 96 Majlis voted yes, including ones who were in the British pocket. The Iranians had won their oil back. But the Brits weren't giving up yet. Ali turned to whine about his problems with the only competent country he knew, the United States. Now, the United States was loved in Iran. The US was the goal Iranians strived towards, and the most famous American was Howard Baskerville, a martyr in the Constitutional Revolution. At the time, Truman believed that in order to fight the Soviet Union, he should offer poorer countries a hand of friendship to show them that the US, not the USSR, was their friend. He responded to the British claims by saying that he sympathized with the Iranian cause for freedom and rebellion against oppression. Why isn't that what created the United States in the first place? Essentially, the British got rejected, and over 95% of the Iranian country supported Mossadegh. Whatever could they ever hope on doing? So that's when the idea hit them. Why not plan a coup? Iran was already economically collapsing due to the harsh worldwide embargo on Iranian nationalized oil forced by the British. The next step was a full takeover. Mossadegh realized that under his own rather large nose, the British were planning something big, so he broke off diplomatic relations with the British, forcing their diplomats as well as their spies out of the country. The MI6 could no longer plan a coup to oust Mossadegh in Iran. If there would be a coup, only the Americans could stage it, and the opportunity was served on a silver platter when Eisenhower was elected president. The British network in Iran was complex, and it began with the Rashidian brothers. These three brothers had connection to politics, the media, mobsters, and business. This network is now transferred to the Americans, namely John and Alan Dulles, Secretary of State and head of the CIA. Never before in the United States history has the covert and overt sides of foreign policy been run by two brothers. The Dulles quickly accepted the coup, and with Ike's stamp of approval, it was go time. To accomplish the mission, they sent Agent Kermit Roosevelt of the CIA to Iran. He used the Rashidian network to bribe 80% of all Iranian papers to label Mossadegh as a communist or a British spy, while mullahs and politicians and soldiers were bribed to go against Mossadegh. Roosevelt bribed the Shah to issue a decree dismissing Mossadegh and appointing coup member Fazlullah Zahidi, a corrupt general, to prime minister. On coup day, August 16th, a bribed officer Nasiri sent a platoon to Mossadegh and Chief of Staff Taghi Rayahai's house to arrest them. He was ambushed by Rayahai, the city erupted into chaos, and democracy prevailed. Mossadegh cheered as a British jab to Iranian freedom had been deflected. It appears as if freedom has prevailed. With Zahidi a fugitive and Nasiri arrested, it was all over. What was it? Roosevelt, ignoring the bureaucratic orders, now decided it was round two. He called the Rashidian brothers to assist him with their biggest operation. They denied, so he threatened to kill them. However, he managed to convince them, and the second part of the coup was put into fruition. The next day, the streets became a war zone. Paid-off mobs pretending to be pro-Mossadegh attacked pedestrians and looted shops. Ambassador Harriman convinced Mossadegh that Americans in Iran were being insulted on the streets. Mossadegh, known to cry at the sight of an orphan or widow on the streets, called his so-called followers off of the streets. Then paid-off communist mobs attacked the city. CIA Iranian soldiers attacked Mossadegh's home, and his guards were overcome, leaving over 300 dead, some still with money in their pocket. Mossadegh was arrested and tried for treason. The Shah was put back in power, and the freedom was dead in Iran.